Volvo's much improved second generation S60 is a compactly proportioned, smartly styled saloon with the executive elite now firmly in its sights. That's thanks primarily to the clever Drive-E 2-litre diesel engine that's fitted to the D4 variant most will want to look at, a car offering class-leading performance and efficiency that'll have widespread appeal amongst buyers who'll also appreciate this design's smarter looks and classier cabin. Does life really begin at 60? If you're a potential Volvo owner, the answer may well be yes. The Swedish maker's second generation S60 saloon is, we're told, the most dynamic Volvo ever, both to look at and to drive. It's also something of a departure for a brand that has built its reputation on substance and safety rather than style and sportiness. But then something pretty radical was needed to break the German stranglehold on the BMW 3 Series dominated compact executive market where this car must compete. At its original launch in 2010, the signs were that this Mark II S60 was potentially capable of doing exactly that. But such promise was never going to be completely fulfilled with a reliance on other people's engine technology. So, for the fully improved version launched early in 2014, Volvo has bought us some of its own in a D4 diesel variant offering a combination of performance and efficiency that no rival can match. There are smarter looks too, which will come as a pleasant surprise if in buying a Volvo you expect all the design flair of a chartered accountancy firm. And the promise is that all of this will be matched with a greater emphasis on driver involvement than any model the company has produced in more than 80 years of history, an even harder thing to deliver. Particularly if, as Volvo insists, all this has been achieved without sacrificing the substance and safety part of the brand value proposition. Does it all add up? Let's put this car to the test. In sharing driving impressions on films like this, I'm not normally very prescriptive when it comes to engines. Different owners do, after all, have different needs when it comes to specifying what lies under the bonnet. With this improved second generation S60 model though, I'm going to make an exception to that rule. I can't really see why you'd buy this car with any engine other than the D4 diesel unit that I'm trying here. To understand why that is, a little background information is needed. As a brand, Volvo has traditionally relied on Ford engine wear for its modern era models. A safe approach, but not a very profitable one, which is why when the Chinese Zhejiang Geely Corporation acquired the company in 2010, the first priority was to make the Gothenburg maker self-sufficient in the under-bonnet department. Clearly, such a goal would take time to accomplish, which was why this second generation S60 model was originally launched with the same Ford-derived 1.6, 2-litre and 2.4-litre engines used in other Volvo models. But behind the scenes, the engineers were hard at work, completing their own in-house range of power plants, the so-called Drive-E range of engines. All of these will be 2 litres in size, either petrol or diesel, with a lineup of different power outputs broad enough to eventually completely replace the existing Ford units. For the time being, though, only one of the new generation Drive-E engines has been brought to market, the 181 brake horsepower, 16-valve diesel power plant you'll find in the D4 model that I'm driving here. Now, at a stroke, this engine makes the typical Volvo salesperson's job rather awkward, as it's cleaner and more economical than the feeblest 115 brake horsepower, 1.6-litre D2 S60, but faster and more responsive than the priciest diesel in the lineup, the most powerful 215 brake horsepower, 2.4-litre D5 S60 variant. Let's be more specific. As well as being able to average nearly 75 miles to the gallon and emit under 100 grams per kilometre of CO2, this D4 gets to 62 miles an hour from rest in just 6.9 seconds on the way to 143 miles an hour. Even if you opt for the 8-speed automatic version, a car like the one I'm trying here, those stats are hardly affected. Such are the benefits of modern technology. Of course, there's always the possibility that your budget might not be able to stretch up to D4 purchase, or that you might be offered an unmissable deal on an S60 with one of the older engines. To allow for that scenario, I'll tell you that if you opt for a 1.6 litre D2 variant, or choose to boost your diesel S60's power up to 136 brake horsepower in the 2 litre D3 model, you're looking at a 0 to 62 mile an hour sprint time of just over 10 seconds en route to a maximum speed of just over 120 miles an hour. In the top diesel 215 brake horsepower D5 version, those figures are improved to 7.4 seconds and 143 miles an hour. Readings you can up a little further by paying extra for a Polestar performance pack that marginally boosts the power output to 230 brake horsepower. But if you do that, you'll end up paying a lot of money for a car that still isn't a better all-round package than the S60 D4 that I'm driving here. Enough about engines. What about driving dynamics? Is this really the premium sports saloon that the glossy advertising promises? Well, to try and answer that, I've been driving this S60 for a few days now, and having put a few miles under its wheels, I can't get away from thinking two things. First, that it's not quite as sporty as Volvo thinks it is. And second, that this is probably a very good thing. Now, don't get me wrong, this is a more dynamic drive than anything the Swedish brand has yet provided in this market segment. But then they were hardly starting from a class-leading position in that respect. Traditionally, Volvos have always been above ballistic back-road behaviour, instead prioritising comfort, ride and refinement. Attempts in the past to add a little handling vim to that mix with sporting R models were usually somewhat crudely delivered, compromising the values that made people want to buy into the brand in the first place. But not here. In this S60, we've at last got a reasonably rewarding driver's car that's also a Volvo. At last. The reasons why have much to do with a dynamic chassis carefully developed over the most demanding British B roads. You can take this a step further by opting for an R-Design model with stiffer suspension, but personally I wouldn't. This firm setup dilutes one of this car's greatest virtues, the composed ride it offers over poor surfaces, superior in fact to what's on offer in this car's German rivals. No, there are other ways to make this S60 handle more sharply that don't involve higher chiropractor's bills. Namely, a tick in the box for the optional 4C, which stands for Continuously Controlled Chassis Concept, the 4C active chassis with adaptive damping that via comfort, sport or advanced settings enables the driver to alter the character of the car based on the road that you're on and the mood that you're in. Even if you do without this feature, a couple of other standard inclusions are enough to offer up a surprising degree of dynamic brio. First, there's a steering setup that's about 10% quicker and more direct than it was in the first generation S60. And secondly, there's torque vectoring, a system that works through the turns to counter both understeer and wheel spin by lightly micro-braking whichever front wheel is threatening to lose grip, firing you on from bend to bend in a way that will be revolutionary to long-time Volvo owners. If you're in a D4 diesel model, as I am here, you'll also benefit from a reduction in engine weight of as much as 90 kilograms in comparison to some of the other drivetrains across the range. Now, with less bulk to carry around up front, this car feels even more eager to turn in. And all this from an S60 that still manages to offer more relaxed long-distance refinement than any the marque has yet produced. It's a surprising drive. If this car represents the future direction of Volvo design, then the company is probably in very safe hands. With this second generation model, stylist Orjan Sterner and his team set out to create something as far away from the boxy Volvo stereotype as they could get, and the result is rather handsome, with a coupe-like roofline and Aston Martin-style tail flourishes. Brand marketeers even go as far as to call this a four-door coupe, by which they mean the kind of really rakish design you'd get in a rival like, say, Mercedes CLA Class or Volkswagen CC. In the metal, this is a far boxier and more practical thing than either of those two cars, but the flowing, supposedly racetrack-inspired looks are still pleasing on the eye. It's a sleek shape too, with strong shoulder lines and a slippery 0.29 CD drag coefficient. This updated version gets what Volvo describes as more focused and determined looking headlamps, added to create what's intended to be a more expressive front end. The S60's horizontal lines have also been emphasised at both the front and the rear, and together with details such as a wider grille and the addition of daytime running lights, the various changes give this car a more striking, purposeful presence. Under the skin, of course, the original second generation S60 recipe is, as it always was, Ford Mondeo based, which means the underpinnings are exactly the same as those used in the brand's supposedly larger V70 estate and S80 saloon models. Volvo's original marketing material for this model suggested that buyers would be so carried away by their sweeping shape that they'd be surprised to find this car has rear doors. Well, I wasn't, and I don't think you will be either. Note to Volvo's marketeers, this isn't a four-door coupe. If it was, there wouldn't be the class-competitive headroom that's on offer back here. As with most cars in the compact executive segment, 2 adults will be comfortable, but 3 will be a bit of a squash. In fact, a third rear seat adult will be even more uncomfortable than they would normally be in a car of this kind, thanks to the narrow curved centre seat they've to be perched upon. Out back, the 339 litre boot capacity is rather more compact than it should be, around 30% smaller than the trunk you'd get in, say, an Audi A4. Indeed, it's even smaller than the space you get in the saloon version of that car's more diminutive stablemate, the Audi A3. Volvo seems to be acutely aware of this issue, which is why, as you'd expect, a 60/40 split-folding rear bench is standard. There's also a ski hatch for longer items, and perhaps more surprisingly, a fold-flat front passenger seat is also included across the range so that really long loads can be accommodated. That's an almost unique feature in this class, but if it isn't enough, then your dealer will direct you towards the V60 estate version of this car, which offers a 430 litre boot, extendable to 1,241 litres with the seats folded. Now, should this S60's trunk be sufficient for your needs, you will at least find the space it does offer to be eminently usable. I especially like this shallow hinged boot floor compartment. Lift up the flap and you can mess up the floor with muddy stuff. Then when you remove your wellies or whatever, the flap will then come down again and you don't have to worry about cleaning the boot floor. Well, not immediately anyway, out of sight, out of mind and all that. At the wheel, the most important part of any car, according to Volvo's head of design, it's all very nice indeed, with a premium feel right across the S60 range that you only really get on the more expensive versions of BMW, Audi and Mercedes rivals. The idea is that, like IKEA furniture, this cabin should be typically Scandinavian. Comfortable, simple, intuitive and visually pleasing. And broadly it is now, thanks to a subtle redesign which has introduced smarter materials and silk metal frames around the air vents and light controls. One of the nicest touches that's worth shelling out a little extra for is the high-tech TFT instrument display. With the flick of a switch, you can choose between 3 different dial layouts. an amber backlit elegance setting for comfort-orientated day-to-day motoring, a green backlit eco setting to help you drive more economically, and a red backlit performance mode that will better suit spirited driving. The kind of thing that the Swedish brand hopes this second generation model's slightly lower driving position and smaller steering wheel will put you in the mood for. Now, it'll also help in this respect that the signature Volvo floating centre console is slightly angled more towards the driver for a greater cockpit style feel. That'll be familiar if you owned an early version of this second generation model. New to you though will be the clever Sensus Connect infotainment system that allows you to add connectivity and internet access right into the car. Now this setup turns the 7-inch infotainment display that you get on the dash into a state-of-the-art infrared beam scan screen that can be used easily even when wearing gloves, a world first. As a driver, you've the choice of going online either via a car-mounted 3G or 4G dongle or by using your own mobile phone. High-tech features include a voice activation system that works on all music sources and the industry's first in-dash fully integrated voice search Spotify application. It's also possible to share a Wi-Fi network with everyone in the car. Of course, it's possible to get carried away with gadgetry like this and forget more crucial considerations. The seats, for example. It's remarkable how little importance we attach to the things we'll be sitting on in our cars, given that we'll be spending many hundreds or thousands of hours in the things. And down the years, Volvo has quietly earned a reputation for making the comfiest chairs in the business. This S60 continues that form line with what have to be the most supportive yet wonderfully pillowy seats in the compact executive saloon sector. The sports seat in the R Design model is particularly good, positioning you beautifully throughout the longest drive. The market has traditionally seen this S60 as a compact executive saloon, Volvo's take on the genre defined by German contenders like Audi's A4, BMW's 3 Series and the Mercedes C-Class. While you could certainly consider a plusher S60 variant against any of those contenders, you can, after all, easily find yourself paying in the £30,000 to £35,000 bracket or more for a really plush and powerful version of this car. A huge proportion of UK S60 sales are made in the £20,000 to £25,000 bracket. Or, to put it another way, £3,000 to £4,000 below equivalent A4, 3 Series or C-Class models. So it's a slightly different proposition. In terms of size, as well as price, the boot and rear seat space of this car is, after all, more comparable to contenders in the new market niche that Audi and Mercedes are both developing, with marginally smaller models like the A3 Saloon and Mercedes CLA class. Namely, a segment with four-door saloons offering pretty much what you get with an A4, a 3 Series or a C-Class, but in a slightly more compact form. With the S60, Volvo has been offering this kind of thing for years and still manages to do so at prices that substantially undercut the A3 and the CLA, with a model-for-model saving that might be around £1,500 or so on an A3, but could be as much as £4,000 to £5,000 on a CLA. You could, in other words, quite accurately say there's nothing quite like an S60, and there's certainly nothing quite like the S60 I have here, the D4 diesel variant that every Volvo dealer will want potential buyers to try first, with a high-tech drivey engine offering an unrivaled combination of performance and efficiency. Now, I'm sure there must be other cars on the market capable of sprinting from rest to 62 miles an hour in under 7 seconds, yet still able to average nearly 75 miles per gallon and emit less than 100 grams per kilometre of CO2. I'm struggling, though, to think of one right now. Though the S60 lineup does offer a couple of petrol options, the 150 brake horsepower T3 and the potent 306 brake horsepower T6, almost all buyers want a diesel. And these people would do well to find the premium necessary to bypass the old Ford-derived engines you'll find in lesser bottom-of-the-range S60 models. That's a 1.6 in the D2 and a 2-litre unit in the D3, to get themselves a slice of D4 motoring. D4 pricing starts from just over £23,000, so you're looking at less than £2,000 more than what you'd pay for the cheapest, feeblest, and actually less frugal D2 entry-level S60. Whichever mainstream S60 variant you choose, there's the alternative of paying around £1,500 more for the expected automatic transmission option, though in this case all auto gearboxes aren't the same. The older units, the Ford-derived PowerShift system you get on D2 and T3 models, and Volvo's familiar Geartronic setup as fitted to D3, D5 and T6 variants. Both have 6 speeds. More modern and efficient, though, is the more sophisticated 8-speed Geartronic transmission that this D4 model gets. It's fitted to the car I have here and is yet another reason why S60 buyers should choose this particular engine derivative. Volvo V60 buyers too, the V60 being the better-selling estate version of this car that's otherwise pretty much identical, offered at a model-for-model premium of around £1,200. As for equipment, well, all models come decently kitted out. Across the range, you can expect to find features like alloy wheels of at least 16 inches in size, LED daytime running lights, parking sensors, Bluetooth phone compatibility, cruise control, climate control, Volvo's sensor satellite navigation setup, and a high-quality stereo system including a DAB radio and controls on the leather-wrapped steering wheel. There's also a Sensus Connect with high-performance sound system that plays DVDs and uses the dashboard's integrated 7-inch display screen to connect you through to selected web apps and an internet browser. Further up the range, there are niceties like leather trim, a power-operated driver's seat, and xenon headlamps that actively bend with the road to better illuminate your way at night. What really makes this car stand out, though, is its safety provision. Volvo Safety used to be all about protecting you after you'd had an accident. Now, more laudably, it's more about making sure you don't have one in the first place. Headlining the standard features is the impressive City Safety System. This is Volvo's technology for avoiding low-speed collisions in city traffic and tailbacks. If you're about to drive into the vehicle in front and the electronics sense that you're not going to react, the car will brake itself. Volvo was the first manufacturer in the world to offer this type of setup as standard. There's plenty of other electronic assistance too. Torque vectoring is now standard, a system which works through the turns to counter both understeer and wheel spin by lightly micro-braking whichever front wheel is threatening to lose grip. Now, this system works as an integral part of the DSTC, that's Dynamic Stability and Traction Control package. Passive safety kit, meanwhile, includes twin front, side and curtain airbags that work with Volvo's SIPS, that's Side Impact Protection System, plus Isofix child seat fastenings. If you want to go further, then there's the option of a driver support pack, including a whole raft of electronic cleverness for a premium of just under £2,000. Collision warning with full auto brake, well, that's a system that scans the road ahead for potential accidents at higher speeds, while pedestrian and cyclist detection, that's a setup that specifically targets people and bikers. ACC adaptive cruise control and distance alert uses a radar to keep you a safe distance from the car ahead on the highway, while on automatic models there's also a Q Assist feature that senses a highway tailback and can automatically take you right back to a standstill and off again without leaving cruise control. The BLIS, Blind Spot Information System with cross-traffic alert, will stop you from dangerously pulling out to overtake in front of another car and also help you when you're reversing out of a parking space into heavy traffic. There's also a lane-keeping system to stop dozy drivers from veering out of their lanes on the highway. And DAC, Driver Alert Control, will monitor your driving reactions during a journey and suggest that you stop for a restorative coffee if the electronics sense that you're getting drowsy. Finally, there's a roadside information display that displays speed limit and road warning signs on the dash as you pass them, and high beam assist that'll automatically dip your high beam for you at night in the face of oncoming traffic. With that little lot fitted, you'll be doing very well indeed to have an accident in this car. However you choose to exactly classify it, this S60 is an executive car, but it needn't come with executive segment running costs. Quite the opposite, in fact. What if I were to tell you that the fuel and CO2 costs of running one of these were less than the cheapest 1.25 litre Ford Fiesta Super Mini? Well, that's just what I'm going to tell you. Fitted with Volvo's latest generation Drive-E 2-litre diesel engine, an S60 D4 variant, like the one I'm trying here, delivers 74.3 miles to the gallon on the combined cycle. That's better not only than rival diesel models, but also superior to what you get in a far pricier petrol-electric hybrid. Lexus's comparably sized IS300H Saloon, for example, will take you 10 fewer miles on every gallon. There are hybrid-like CO2 emissions too. For the first time, Volvo has achieved a sub 100 grams per kilometre figure in one of its models, 99 grams per kilometre in this case, a reading that no diesel-powered compact executive saloon of any kind can get anywhere near, even eco-poster cars like BMW's supposedly super-frugal 320d efficient dynamics model, which incidentally costs around £5,000 more and will cost you around £500 a year more to tax. So, how has Volvo done it? As you would expect, there's fuel-saving electric power steering and a stop-start system to cut the engine when you don't need it, stuck in traffic or waiting at the lights. But the technology goes a lot deeper than that. I won't go into the technicalities, but the savings have been achieved through things like the reduction of inner friction in the engine, more precise fuel injection, smart heat management in the engine, advanced combustion control, and the use of a special fuel pump. Competitors really need to take one of these Drive-E engines apart and see how it's all been done. Your running cost returns aren't even very significantly affected if, as I probably would, you specify your S60 D4 with Volvo's high-tech 8-speed automatic gearbox. Expect 67.3 miles to the gallon on the combined cycle and 109 grams per kilometre. That's because this auto transmission has a clever Eco Plus feature that, when activated, softens throttle response, tweaks the climate control and the turbo cut-in point, changes the gear shift pattern and adds an Eco Coast function that deactivates engine braking when cruising. As for the rest of the S60 lineup, well, it says much about the technology behind the Drive-E D4 engine I've been talking about, that it delivers 181 brake horsepower performance, yet still returns running cost figures better than those of the entry-level 115 brake horsepower D2 variant. This model uses basically the same 1.6 litre diesel you'll find in a Ford Focus to achieve 72.4 miles to the gallon on the combined cycle and 103 grams per kilometre of CO2. Not far behind that is the 2 litre 136 brake horsepower D3 version, which manages 65.7 miles to the gallon and 114 grams per kilometre. Even the 215 brake horsepower 5-cylinder 2.4 litre D5 model delivers 62.8 miles to the gallon and 119 grams per kilometre. For completeness, I'll also give you the figures for the two minority interest petrol variants. The 150 brake horsepower T3, managing 48.7 miles to the gallon and 135 grams per kilometre, and the rare 306 brake horsepower T6, delivering 44.1 miles to the gallon and 149 grams per kilometre. What else? Well, residual values won't be quite up at prestige German brand levels, but they'll be a cut above the mainstream. And insurance groupings seem to be affordable, especially if you opt for this D4 model, which has been pitched at Group 27. Insurance groupings start at 17 and won't rise above 31 for diesel models. There's also Volvo On Call, a downloadable mobile app that puts you in constant touch with your car. Via this, you can check your fuel, request roadside assistance or emergency help, report your car stolen, and have it tracked for easy retrieval. The app will even help you locate your car if you've forgotten where you parked it. And if you lock your keys inside the car, it can remotely unlock the doors for you. Very clever. Volvo founders Gustav Larsson and Assar Gabrielsson would have been surprised by this S60, but not too surprised. After all, the things we expect the brand to deliver are certainly very much evident. Class-leading safety, solid build quality, and a cool, classy Scandinavian feel. It's just that in this case, for the first time, they've been fused with more vibrant design, a driver-focused chassis, and high-tech engine technology. It's that last element that should really revitalise this car's appeal as a more cost-effective alternative to German brand compact executive saloons. Any car that can deliver 99 grams per kilometre of CO2, 62 miles an hour from rest in under 7 seconds, and nearly 75 miles to the gallon in regular use has to be worthy of anyone's respect. A small brand Volvo may be, but it's punching well above its weight here. True, this may not quite be the naughtily sporting car we're promised in the ads, and it could be a little more practical too. On the plus side though, many will find it hard not to be won over by the smooth-riding, safely sensible Volvo package this S60 can deliver. Overall then, what we have here is a less retiring 60. A highly impressive package that's an intriguing alternative to the compact executive mainstream. You should try it.